What are your core values? What boundaries have you put in place to protect those core values? Where did you get those core values from? From your childhood, through healing trauma and creating new values and boundaries for yourself? I used to think that I had healthy boundaries until I was forced over the past few years to relive some of the traumas that I thought I'd never have to experience again. We get into a state of confusion on who we are. We're taught to compromise in relationships. And when we compromise, we're supposed to lose a part of ourself. We've been taught so ass backwards in this society. So it's time to deprogram ourselves and relearn and reteach ourselves what matters most to us. I am Holly, and I'm sharing a part of my journey to bring courage and inspire you on yours. I have been single more times than not in my life. I'm 40. I've been single now for a few years. It's been a few years. This year alone, I was proposed to by a friend. I was asked out at least a handful of times. And I've also been propositioned for sex. At least he was honest up front about what he wanted rather than leading me on and getting what he wanted and then leaving. We never even met. So there are many different ways where our values and boundaries are tested. Satan loves to throw tests at us just to deceive us. Being alone is a lot better than being unhappy with someone. And the reason I've been alone one of the main reasons I've been alone more than not is due to a few contributing factors from my childhood, which I've really carried with me, which has been a part of my core values. Now, I've been with several people, I've been with quite a few people, attempting romantic partnerships. And the majority of them lasted about 3 months. Because I would see that we're not meant to be. And so I would thank them and we'd part ways. And the majority of them I could see in the streets right now, and we'd still give each other a hug and ask how each other is. They weren't ended on bad terms. Because we knew that it wasn't a long-term thing. So we both accepted what it was and appreciated what we did have and what we did share. Only until recently, until these past few years, starting with my child's father and after that, they've been my biggest lessons in relationships. So the core values that I hold stemmed from one time when I was in, I'm pretty sure it was grade 5, Mr. Gladding's class. And this is my first boyfriend, and he was one of the boys. I had a crush on 2 boys in elementary school. And he was one of the boys that I had a crush on. And there was no being together, there was no hanging out, there was no holding hands. It was dialogue between our friends and us. And I even remember him asking one of my friends to ask me if I would French kiss him. and I said to the person that asked me, I said, "You tell him to come and ask me that." Grade 5. I was always feisty. I was confident. I stood up for myself. And I told them, I said, you tell Kyle to come and ask me himself." He never did. Christmas came, and he was sweet. Although again, we didn't speak, we didn't hang out, but we had those, okay, in the hallway, we had a cubby up top, and we had hooks for our coats, and your boots go under the bench. So this was our hallway space for our coats and boots. There were no lockers. And so in my space, he had put a Christmas gift for me. And it was like this silver amber necklace and earrings. And I was blown away at the thought of giving me this. And he also gave me an alphabet book that he made. And I kept the necklace and earrings for a very long time. I had them even after high school. And eventually I donated them. I don't think I've got them anymore. I tend to release physical items in order to fully release the people that I've had in my life. There's attachments that come along with things, with tangible items. And so the thought that was put in by this little boy is some of the value that I've carried with me on knowing how I should be treated. When a little boy, who he probably got advice from his older brother, all in all, he still did something that was extremely kind. And it stuck with me forever. The other time where I was conditioned with such value and standards, which some people would see as high standards, although it's me knowing what I deserve and what I want. And that's through my grandparents. My grandparents on my father's side, and the lights go out. My grandparents on my father's side were what I saw as the ideal partnership. So as far as I can remember, they slept in their own rooms, and they didn't used to, although my grandfather was a huge snorer, and my grandmother, she had her moments also, so I can imagine them wanting a good sleep away from each other in separate rooms. They still held hands and kissed, and they had this relationship where they each had their thing. They each had their life. My grandfather loved working in the workshop. He'd make us whistles, like these cool little whistles. He would do so many cool things in the workshop, and he was a mechanic also. And he'd sit out on the back deck with his slingshot and fire rocks and stuff at the crows that would try and be eating at the cherry tree. And he had a string with these foil plates hung up on the string, and he'd hit the foil plates to scare the birds away. And he would sit out back, and he'd always have an afternoon nap downstairs in the lazy boy with his headphones on, watching TV. And my grandmother had her things, and we watched Matlock, and we'd watch Murder, She Wrote, and Golden Girls and Wheel of Fortune and stuff like that. And she knitted and crocheted. And at lunch, they'd each sit at a separate table and play solitaire. And then they would get together with their friends and play like card games, like bridge. So they had their own times apart, as well as lots of time together. And my grandfather, no matter what the weather was, he would always come around the van and he would open our door and get us in before he'd go around to his door. He would come around to our door, unlock it, let us in, and then unlock the door so he could get in the other side. He was a true gentleman. And my grandmother, she had this little Ford Zilla Escort. It is a tiny, like, probably 1982, 83 little Ford. It was baby blue, and it was small. And we'd be driving in it, and around a corner, she would be like, "Wee!" and she'd lean into the corner, and I would lean out. As we're going around the corner like this, I'd be leaning out, and she's like, "Don't do that, the car's gonna tip over." She'd smack me and tell me to sit up straight in my chair, or I'd have to put my arms around the back of the chair. She wouldn't let you fart in the same room. She'd tell you to get out. Couldn't watch The Simpsons, couldn't watch wrestling. My grandpa would be afraid. "I'm afraid." That's how he'd call for food to be ready. For supper time, he'd say, "I'm afraid." My dad didn't even remember that. So he couldn't tell me why he'd say that. Although I started to think that it was because he was worried that we might not like his cooking. So he was like, "Come get it, I'm afraid. Don't tell me if you don't like it." And then my grandfather got sick with pancreatic cancer, and they weren't people that were about to be in the hospital hooked up to machines. So my grandfather had a PSW come to the house, and she'd check on him, and my family would check on him, and I wasn't told much. I wasn't really told about him being sick until when it was, closer to him dying. And I didn't want to see him that way, and I couldn't handle it. And I was doing lots of drugs and partying at the time. And after he passed, I promised myself that I'd be there for my grandmother. I just looked at the timer. It was 1331. The mirroring effect. And so I'd be out in the garden with my grandmother helping her. They had a beautiful yard. And she couldn't breathe. And I asked her if she was okay, and she said, "I've seen 7 doctors, and they all told me I had asthma." Asthma at late 70s. She was 70 something. And she said, "I go see a specialist tomorrow." And she went and saw the specialist, and he told her that if she didn't see him, that she'd probably have been dead within a few days. Her throat was so closed up with cancer. Within 3 months of my grandfather passing, my grandma left. She didn't want to be here without him. And on their headstone, she put daisies, and she put, "Miss your voice and the touch of your hands." They were married over 50 years. My grandfather built the house that my father was raised in. He made the blueprints himself and then built the house with his father. If those factors don't weigh into why I am still single, or how I have not settled to be with any of the boys that I was with prior, that I didn't stick around to be mistreated by my child's father, who lied to me and told me that he was separated, when in fact he was still married. And then he had the audacity to go around telling everybody that I was a one-night stand and that I was just trying to get pregnant for child support. Meanwhile, he introduced me to his mother. Brought me and introduced me to his mother. And we worked on the same job site and spoke about having a family. And he told me that he told his wife about me, his ex-wife at the time, before we even hung out. There is a whole script there. So after being with someone like that, and then being with someone who left a marriage, came to live with me, I had no room for him and his daughter, so I went and bought a second house just so that they had space to be in here. That's the whole reason I lost my real estate license, because of what happened there. And then him breaking up with me because I reminded him, I was triggering parts of him that reminded him of his ex. And left me with a $3,000 mortgage on the one property and probably around $2,000 on the other. And didn't give a shit about helping out in that way, or even coming to the property and helping me increase the value of the property so I could sell it. And then trying to be with someone I'd known for 20 years. He told me that he was getting sober. Meanwhile, I drive across the country to pick him up and move him back across the country to his mother's house. And he's withdrawing because he wasn't sober. And then him claiming that we're going to be together, and over 2 years of us never hanging out, nothing had changed. And nothing happens unless it's convenient for him. So these are my 3 past relationships where I truly got to learn my value and truly reset my healthy boundaries. When I look at, hold on one sec here. When I look at how long I've actually been in relationships as compared to how long I've been single, my first relationship, we were together about 4 years total. We got engaged. I was 19 before I really dated. I knew I couldn't trust guys. I would prefer them to be my friends. I was a huge tomboy. I was one of the guys. I was seen as that way for a very long time. And having to relearn my values. And so looking back over the past 21 years, I may have been in relationships for a total of 7 to 8 years. And the majority of them lasting 3 months. My child's father, we were only together 3 months. 3 months. He promised me that he was moving up to where I was, so we talked about having a family, and as soon as I got pregnant, that all changed. And now I know why. It's because he was still married. And he wanted to try to get me down to his coven, to his little cult down there. I probably wouldn't be here today if I had gone. I am extremely grateful for being as strong as I am. I am extremely grateful for not believing that I need somebody else in my life to make me happy. I've learned to be happy alone. And I've been doing this since I was a teenager, since I was younger than that. I'd take myself to the movies. I would learn how to snowboard myself. I did all this on my own. Because I knew that if I was always spending time waiting for somebody else to come along to do these things with me, I wouldn't accomplish nothing. I wouldn't experience anything. I see so many people who settle because of their childhood traumas, their codependency, and their trauma bonding. There's no genuine connection there, yet people realize that in order to be with someone of a higher caliber, someone of a higher frequency, that they can't be a child. They can't be alcoholics and drug addicts, and they can't be in polygamous relationships. They can't do these toxic behaviors when they want to actually be with someone who is marriage material. So they choose a weaker woman. They choose a weaker man. Because it's easy for their choice and lifestyle. When in actuality, it's not easier. It truly is not easier choosing a weaker partner. The amount of stress and anxiety that causes, rather than choosing someone who will love, nurture, and support you, and challenge you to be a better version of yourself, meglio sola che mal accompagnata. Better alone than in bad company. And people have been so blind by choosing these toxic people to surround themselves with that they can't even see the light and the opportunity, the blessings that God has helped you manifest great things into your life. And yet you turn them away because you're so afraid to be a better version of yourself. What are your core values? What are you willing to sacrifice in your life to get all of the blessings that God is hoping to give to you? Your Creator knows what you truly want and desire. And your Creator is ready to give it all to you. You need to sacrifice something. You need to sacrifice those toxic family members. You need to sacrifice your addictive behaviors. You need to sacrifice something to gain all of the blessings you've been attempting to manifest and wondering why nothing is working out. Why has no thing worked out? You've aligned yourself with Satan, with the devil. What are your core values? And what healthy boundaries will you put up in order to protect pure bliss? Mwah. Blessings to you all.